And so pleased to have John McDaid, the SEC coordinator of football officials, joining us here today. First of all, John, well, number one, welcome into the show. As you think about your time here in the SEC, you're now going on your 7th season. What are some of the big things that come to mind about being the director of officials in the probably the most competitive conference top to bottom?
Well, good morning, guys. Great to see you. Wow, things come to mind. It's what I expected. When I was on the field, I was a referee, a crew chief, and I really enjoyed trying to make the crew of 8 plus 9 and 10 in the replay booth the best we possibly could be, week in and week out. In other words, I was kind of a CEO of a little tiny company, and that was really the bigger reward I was getting while I was still in the field. And when you become a coordinator, it's just that on steroids, right? Now, given the fact that we have Sun Belt officiating and Southern Conference officiating in our program as well, I get to be the CEO of a 250-person company with, we consider on-field officials and replay officials. So that certainly was the expectation. I was going to get to do that, and it certainly has delivered, right? What's happened in the 6+ years now they've been in the position? Things just seem to ratchet up in terms of how important each and every game is to our teams. I don't want to say that teams back when I was on the field, weren't they were more carefree in the outcomes of their games. That certainly wasn't the case, but we have a postseason now to crown a national champion that includes 12 teams, and people are instead of just 4 prior to that, and then prior to that just 2 that would go to a national championship game. And so that's created a different kind of pressure. That's created a different kind of expectation in season on what teams can achieve, and with that, it filters down onto officiating. It just makes what we do that much more scrutinized week in and week out, play by play, in what we're doing. And I'm trying to keep up with that, right? I'm trying to, while I recruit and train and evaluate our officials week in and week out, season by season, I'm trying to communicate to our schools throughout the conference what we're doing, what the results say, how we're going to react, where we're headed towards.
Coach, John, I want to focus on you here just for a second. Since you were formerly an official, was there a specific stadium, city that was one of your favorites to travel to?
No, I get that question a lot. To tell you the truth, I've been visiting the schools since I've been in this position. Usually half the schools in April, March or April with spring practice, and the other half of the schools during August camps. I try to get to every school every calendar year. And I find myself when I'm on campuses, and typically the stadiums are empty, maybe the practice or scrimmage I'm there to see is in the stadium, or maybe it's not. But the stadiums have a more impressive effect on me in this role when I show up and I actually have time to look at them than when I actually showed up on game days. Game days we were whisked into a tunnel underneath the stands, let's say 2 hours before game time. We had a lot of meetings that we had to go to that were inside the stadium, not out on the field. And then we showed up at the field, did a coin toss, and we went and did a game. And your performance is just like many things in life. Your performance is so predicated on focus. And I talk about focus quite a bit with our officials, and I define focus as lack of distraction.
Yeah.
Right? Cold is lack of heat, and focus is lack of distraction, right? And so sitting and just looking around in the stadiums and the stands and all the tailgating that's going on inside, that can only be distraction for what we're trying to do on Saturday. So, I'm deflecting your question, obviously. They're all impressive, and even you might say, well, hey, John, how about just the chaos, the noise level that are created in the stadiums? There's not one stadium in the SEC that has a monopoly on that. There are quite a number of them that can bring the environment as well. And again, that in and of itself is a distraction. I will tell you this. I did allow myself to take it in during the media break between the third and fourth quarters for at least a couple of reasons. Number one, it's later in the game, and I'm trying to replenish attention span. And one of the ways to replenish attention span is to get off whatever you are focusing on. As far as even if it's 2.5 minutes, it's 2.5 minutes of replenishing attention span. But the second is, a lot of our stadiums have traditions of things they do each and every time during that media timeout. I love the cowbell sketch from Saturday Night Live whenever I was in Starkville, Mississippi. They added it towards the end when I was in the field, but singing Tom Petty, in Gainesville. Dixieland Delight between the third and fourth quarter in Tuscaloosa. I allowed myself that, and I did look forward to those moments.
John, there was a report that came out that the NCAA is going to consider changes to the targeting rule. I don't want you to speculate by any means, but what insight can you provide to us on what goes into these potential rule changes, and what does that look like?
Our rules are largely in three different buckets, right? The first bucket, and Target is in this bucket, is the safety of the players while they play the game. When you think of all personal fouls are related to safety, right? Rule 9 in our rule book is all about personal fouls and unsportsmanlike conduct, and we look at injury data amongst other things when we're considering safety rules. When we're looking at targeting, as an example, illegal blocks below the waist. We've had numerous rule changes over the decades I've been associated with college football officiating because of safety, right? The second bucket is the biggest one, and it's the rules that define how we play the game. Put a different way, how we define the balance between offense and defense, advantage, disadvantage, right? Rules about what constitutes a legal formation on offense is all about creating a fair balance between the offense and defense. And that we just look at, we remember things like spirit of the game. What is the spirit of the game?
Correct.
I'll give you an example of that. The spirit of the game does allow for the offense to try to disguise their cadence on when they're going to snap the ball. They can't do certain things, like a quarterback under center can't jerk his head, right? But he can use voice inflection and use a hard count. That is a part of the spirit of the game. What's not a spirit of the game when you look at offensive formations is trying to deceive your opponent on who's eligible and who's not eligible, right? So anyway, when we look at this second bucket, that's the biggest one. What's the fair balance we want between offense, defense, kickers, and receivers? And then the third thing is just how we administrate the game and other aspects of the game, such as, do we want to allow more advertising on the field, right? The uniform that doesn't correlate to safety issues, right? The patches we put on the uniform. One of the things that's going on right now is, do we want to allow advertising on the players' jerseys? That's the third bucket. And that's the bucket that gets the furthest away from actually the on-field officials, right? Because it doesn't, these are the issues that don't affect the competitive balance between the two teams as we apply the playing rules. It's not a safety issue, right? The two examples I gave you, advertising on the field, advertising on the players' jerseys. The caretakers of the game. It's a broad term. I grant you that. And if you asked me to define that, I don't know that I could. But the caretakers of the game decide the aspects that are in the third bucket.
Absolutely. I've always wanted to ask officials about this particular thing, and it's more about judgment. And you've kind of illustrated a little bit of this as you've talked about just the way that you talk to your officials. But let's just say you have a corner and a wide receiver that are kind of going at it. What's the line that you guys have as far as being able to make these judgment calls about not letting things get out of hand, but still letting those guys who are hyper competitive on the surface still compete? And I'm obviously thinking about just football, but if you pay attention to other sports, whether it's basketball, other physical sports, how do you judge yourself, and what do you tell your guys about letting the guys play as opposed to staying within the letters of the law?
Yeah. You see, you're talking about two players that are what we call chicken fighting after a down, right?
Yeah.
The things that go into that. Well, one of the overriding fundamentals of how I'm asking my officials to officiate a game is we're trying to insert ourselves in the game the least, right? We've had two teams that have practiced all week preparing for their opponent, since the beginning of camp, have prepared to go through the season. No one wants the officials to come in and arbitrarily impact the game, in any way. So that's one of our overriding of fundamentals. In that particular instance, is there a safety issue involved, right? If two guys are just jamming pretty hard each other in the chest, that's different than someone just hauling off and punching another player, right?
Right.
The former, I don't necessarily have a safety issue. The latter, I definitely do, right? So that would be another criterion that we use. The third is this. Is there something happening with that is going to lead to hampering our ability to manage the game, right? Many more times than not, two guys get up, start shoving each other, chicken fighting with each other. It's just a part of the game, right? And I'm asking, do we see ill will being created in that moment? And if the answer is no, and it's just two guys being two guys, no one's creating a safety issue for the other one, we just want to break it up. But here's an example. Guys often, there's certain situations when they're chicken fighting, they'll go to the face mask, they'll go to the helmet. And there's a reason they do that. It hurts.
Yeah.
Right? And what I have found in my experience on looking at a lot of video is that when some guy jams in the face mask, instead of or it differently jams in the chest, it starts to engender ill will. And if we allow that to grow, sometime in that game things are going to go sideways, and our ability to manage the game is going out the window, which we never want to get to. Right? If you got a bunch of nieces and nephews and you volunteer to babysit them, right, you want everything good, right? But as soon as something starts happening where you realize you're going to lose control of your 6 or 7 nieces and nephews, you're going to do something to take care of it.
John, we saw this year the ACC started to unveil the game day look into the replay center, where the audience at home could hear what was being discussed between the referee and the control center. Has the SEC considered adding this as well, or no?
We discuss it. We've discussed it more than once. We were discussing it often. At this point in time, the Southeastern Conference is not interested in doing something like that. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. I'm in college for work study, a intramural official, and so I intramural football, flag football, some basketball, nothing to the level that you are all in. But as I was doing it, there was a push to get guys and females to get into officiating on the high school level, and maybe work your way up to the collegiate level and the professional level. As you take a look at the state of officiating right now, what are some of your the things that you're the most proud of, and maybe some growing concerns in the way that you want to see your profession as a whole make those improvements?
Wow. I'll start with this. We officials, the ones that have actually made the decision to start officiating, there's obviously some kind of reward in it for us that keeps us, that number one, attracted us to do it, and number two, keeps us doing it, right? It could be as simple, and I'm going to assume that your intramural career, officiating career, was focused on maybe money, right? The extra money becomes attractive. But there's certainly other reasons, and I can tell you, I don't know. I started officiating in 1989 in San Diego. My first year I was officiating youth football, Pop Warner, and finished up at the end of my first year with some a handful of high school games. I don't know that I was ever doing it for the money.
Right.
I was doing it I went through a progression that I was very conscious of the entire time I was doing it. I started doing it to stay close to the game, right? I played through college. I knew I wasn't going, I had no interest in being a coach, and officiating was something I identified before I even left school, before I graduated, of ability to stay for the game. So that was the first reward, the magnetism of officiating that grabbed at me. The second was after I started doing it, I realized it was a really unique social club, right?
Yeah.
You know, yeah, we'd go work these games, but then we'd go off and have burgers and beers afterwards, and with guys that, you know, on Friday nights doing high school football in San Diego, maybe 6, 7, 8 crews of guys, crews of 5 would get together at a place, and we'd set up a big long table. We looked like we were in some kind of mess hall in the military, and you know, just telling stories and laughing and so on and so forth. That was a terrific reward for doing it.
Mm-hmm.
The third thing I stumbled upon, and this is what carried me the vast majority of my career, this is what carried me to the level that I got to, is identified it with a way to compete.
Yeah.
Right? I'm a former athlete.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're an athlete and you're a part of a team, you're not just competing in football on Saturdays, you're competing every day in practice. Right? And that was a drug that I didn't have in my life, other than I realized, you know what? If I dedicate myself to be the best I possibly can be,
right,
and see how far up the ladder I could get, it's a way of competing. Mm-hmm. And that's why I do it. So when I look at the state of officiating today, those types of rewards, those types of opportunities of officiating are still there, right? But there's detractors, right? You are not necessarily the most popular person on the field that day, right? Depending on the level you work, you may get some bad press. That's what I'll say. You know, it used to be when I started, maybe you'd get the officiating would get a mention in the newspaper for a 2 or 3 paragraph story that was done in a local paper about a high school football game. But now we have something that is really, really devious and dastardly when it comes to something like officiating, and that is social media.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And I consider myself lucky, or maybe smart, because it was intentional. John McDaid never got involved in social media, right?
Yeah.
And my wife is when I was still in the field, actually, even as a coordinator to this day, she's entertained by it, right? But she knows not to read it to me, bring it to my attention.
Yeah.
Let me know what's out there, because I'm better off, right? Focus is lack of distraction. Mm-hmm. I'm better off not knowing what it is. But social media, the proximity of fans, parents at the younger levels to the officiating on the field, the court, the pool, whatever the case may, the diamond, right? That can work against officiating. We seem to be a society that is much more critical and open to share our negative thoughts because of social media. It works against officiating.
Yeah, absolutely. John, thank you so much for your time. I know you're very busy, and this is an important time of year as you start to implement some new things. We look forward to what's ahead. Thank you so much for your contributions to this great game that we all love, and we're looking forward to seeing you down the road.
Absolutely, guys. Great to see you. Have a terrific day.